I remember lying in bed, staring at the shadows in my room, the faint hum of the ceiling fan filling the silence. The air was thick, almost tangible, pressing down on my chest in a way that made each breath a quiet effort. Outside, the streetlights flickered, casting pale, wavering beams through the blinds. Then it began, the sense of being watched, not just in the room, but in the space between my thoughts. My body felt heavy, locked in place, and I couldn't move, couldn't even scream. A shadow stretched across the ceiling, elongating, writhing, and for a moment, I thought it had a shape almost human, yet impossibly wrong. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, slow and deliberate, as if synchronized with the thing that lingered just beyond my vision. That's when I felt it lean closer, a cold presence pressing into the edges of my mind, and a whisper brushed my ear. I never should have closed my eyes. The first night was colder than I expected, even with the windows shut. A thin wind slipped through the seams. It brushed against my skin like someone tracing a line along my arm. The room was small. White walls, uneven floorboards, a single bulb hanging low. It buzzed faintly, almost like it was breathing. I told myself it was just a new place. Old buildings have their own noises, their own size, but the air felt to wear. When I set down my suitcase, the floor gave a soft groan, as if something underneath shifted its weight. I froze, waiting for it to settle. Nothing, just the hum of the light, and the faint ticking of the clock above the door. I unpacked slowly, clothes folded into drawers that smelled faintly of dust and rain. The bedspread was cool to the touch, smooth, but with a dampness that never left. When I turned off the light, everything changed. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It pressed in, thick and heavy, like the walls were holding their breath. I could hear the pipes under the floor, a slow drip somewhere deep in the building, and then a rustle. It came from the corner, near the window, a faint shift like fabric brushing against fabric. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and the room took on a softer shape, pale, grainy outlines. The curtain swayed, even though the window was closed. The air moved differently there, colder. I pulled the blanket tighter, trying not to look, but my eyes kept returning to that corner, to that faint movement that didn't match the rest of the stillness. Something felt wrong. Not loud, not dramatic, just quietly wrong. The air had weight now, like it was filled with someone's breath. Each exhale made the walls pulse in the dark. I reached for the light switch, stopped halfway. If I turned it on, I'd have to see whatever was waiting. Instead, I listened. The drip had stopped. The clock had stopped. Only the faint hum from somewhere inside the walls remained. A low vibration that seemed to come from behind the plaster, crawling through the wiring, following the rhythm of my heartbeat. I whispered to myself, something small, something meaningless, just to break the stillness. But the room swallowed it whole. No echo. When I blinked, the shapes had shifted again. The corner seemed closer. The curtain no longer moved. The air was colder around my face, as if someone stood just above me. I didn't dare breathe too deeply. Every inhale felt stolen. Then I heard it, not a sound, more like a change, a pressure. Something leaned. The floor sighed, and a faint warmth brushed the side of my neck, where my pulse beat fastest. I froze, didn't move, didn't think. The air behind me felt thick, almost wet, like fog had gathered inside the room, dense enough to touch. It smelled faintly of metal and old rain. I turned slowly, so slow I could hear my own bones shift. There was nothing there, only the faint shimmer of light from the street bleeding through the curtain's edge. But I knew the air had moved because something had been there, something that didn't leave when I looked. I sat up and switched on the light. The bulb flickered, once, twice, then steadied. The corners of the room looked ordinary again. Just walls, just dust, just me. Still, the air hadn't changed. It was still too heavy, still breathing when I wasn't. I left the light on that night, lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint electric hum. Somewhere beneath it, something else pulsed, slower, softer, like a second heartbeat. When morning came, the light felt different, thin, weak, as if the night had been longer than it should have been. The walls looked the same, but the feeling lingered. That quiet sense of being watched, of not being the first to sleep in this room. I told myself it was just the first night, just the way new places feel before they settle around you. But as I left for work, I glanced back at the bed and saw the blanket, still slightly indented, as if someone was still lying there. It started sometime after midnight. The air in the room felt heavier than before, like something unseen had settled over it. The lamp beside me was still on, dim, flickering slightly, but the light barely touched the corners anymore. It just floated there, pale and tired. I remember closing my eyes, just for a moment, letting the hum of the walls blur into nothing, and then I couldn't move. At first, I thought I was dreaming. My body felt distant, like it wasn't mine. I tried to lift a hand, but it stayed there, pressed into the blanket. Something pressed back, not sudden, not violent, just steady, like a slow hand laying itself across my chest. Heavy, warm, too real to ignore. My breath caught. The weight grew stronger, spreading across my ribs. It pressed until every inhale felt stolen. The silence was sharp now. Even the hum from the bulb had stopped. The air was still enough to hear my own pulse echoing in my ears. I wanted to scream, but my throat was locked, muscles tight, frozen mid-breath. Only a thin sound escaped, like air leaking through teeth. That's when I noticed it. A shadow near the ceiling, moving without light. It bent and unbent, stretching toward me. I couldn't look away. It didn't crawl or float. It lowered itself, slow as dripping water. The air thickened around my face. The smell of iron filled my nose, faint like old coins and damp cloth. Each breath burned. It was watching me. I could feel it. Not with my eyes, but with every nerve beneath my skin. The shape leaned closer, the edges trembling like smoke, and in the pale glow from the lamp, I saw the faintest ripple, as if something invisible exhaled over me. The weight deepened, pressed until my heartbeat stuttered. My chest ached under it. I tried to pray, or maybe just think of anything bright, but the thoughts scattered before it reached my lips. My mind wasn't alone anymore. Something else moved inside it, whisper thin, curling around each thought before it formed. Soft like static, it didn't speak in words. It remembered instead. Moments I hadn't thought of in years flickered behind my eyelids. Me as a child, lying awake in another dark room, feeling the same pressure. Had it always been there? Had it been waiting for me to notice? The light above the bed began to pulse. Once, twice, then steadied into a dim, amber glow. In that dimness, the shadow on the ceiling seemed closer, its edges sharper, darker than before. Something dripped from it, not liquid, something colder, like the feeling of a stare you can't turn from. The hand, or whatever it was, shifted on my chest. The skin beneath it tingled, then burned. Each heartbeat felt heavier, slower, deeper in the dark. It leaned closer, close enough for the air around my ear to move. Close enough for me to feel the warmth of something that wasn't breathing. I couldn't blink, couldn't turn away. The shadow trembled, then broke apart. Like smoke being pulled through invisible fingers, the pressure stayed, even after the shape dissolved, even after I thought it was gone. And then a whisper, not in the room, inside my chest, where the weight had been. It said nothing clear, just a low, drawn-out breath that felt like mine but wasn't, and then the pressure lifted. I gasped, the first sound I made in what felt like hours. My body jolted, shaking. The light steadied. Everything went still again. The clock on the wall read 3:03. My chest hurt where the weight had been. A faint bruise already forming under the collarbone. I sat there, trying to catch my breath. Every corner looked darker than it should have. Every shadow leaned a little too long toward the bed. I didn't sleep again. Not that night. But just before dawn, when the first gray light touched the walls, the blanket shifted on its own. It pressed down for half a heartbeat, as if reminding me it could come back when never wanted. It started near dusk, the kind of pale orange light that makes everything look softer until it doesn't. The room was quiet again, just the faint hum of the refrigerator through the wall, the smell of old paint and cold air lingering near the windows. I sat on the edge of the bed, not thinking of much, just watching how the light bent through the curtains. The fabric swayed, brushing softly against the sill. That's when I saw it. A shadow, faint, stretched long across the floorboards. It moved just slightly, as if someone had passed in front of the window. But the hallway outside was empty. I checked. No footsteps. No door. Just that same slow hum filling the silence. When I turned back, the shadow wasn't gone. It had changed. Thinner now, sharper at the edges. It clung to the wall, tall, uneven, its outline bending with the shape of the ceiling. The light behind it didn't move. Only the shadow did. I blinked. It stilled. But when I looked away and back again, it was closer. Not by much. Just a few inches higher up the wall. Enough to make my chest tighten. I turned on the lamp. The light washed over everything in a soft, yellow haze. The shadow melted away like fog under sunlight. For a moment, I felt foolish. It had to be a trick. My eyes adjusting, tired from another restless night. I told myself that and left the lamp on. But later, as the sky darkened and the room cooled, I noticed them again. Not one, several. They slipped out from the corners, long streaks that bent when I moved, but not always in the same direction. Each breath I took made the air feel thicker. The room seemed smaller, like the walls leaned in slightly with every blink. The shadows rippled, quiet, patient things. They didn't follow the light anymore. They moved through it. I watched one drag itself across the floor, slow as spilled ink, curling up the leg of the desk. It stopped where the wood met the wall, as though listening. Then it grew. The air around it pulsed, faintly alive. And from the corner of my eye, I thought I saw it split, two shapes now almost breathing in rhythm. The more I stared, the more they seemed to pulse with me. Every heartbeat made them tremble, stretching longer each time. I didn't want to move, didn't want to break the stillness between us. The floor felt soft beneath my feet, like the wood had forgotten how to stay solid. The shadows began to climb, over the dresser, across the mirror. When they reached the ceiling, they hung there, dripping in reverse, as though gravity had forgotten them. I thought of turning on every light. I thought of leaving, but I couldn't. Something in the silence felt expectant, like if I spoke, they'd listen. If I moved, they'd follow. The lamp flickered once, then twice, and for a heartbeat, everything went dark. When it came back, the walls were full of them, dozens of shapes, tangled and swaying, each bending toward me with slow, deliberate grace. They had no faces, no forms I could name, just a faint impression of something that remembered what it used to be. I felt it in my chest again, that same weight from before, the same invisible presence pressing, just enough to remind me it was real. The shadows began to thin, pulling away from the walls like smoke drawn back into the dark. The air trembled, and then stillness. Only the faint shimmer of light against the window pane. Only my reflection staring back, pale and wide-eyed. But as I moved closer to the glass, I noticed it didn't move with me. It stayed where it was, half turned toward the corner. My reflection, watching something I couldn't see. I turned slowly, every muscle tight, and the room was empty again, the walls bare, the air still. But on the floor, where the first shadow had appeared, the light didn't reach. It bent around something that wasn't there. I left the lamp on all night, watched the walls until morning. And every so often, just before sleep almost took me, I saw the faintest shift of darkness, like it was still breathing. It was a still night, the kind that pressed against the windows, holding every sound outside. The air felt colder than usual, thicker, like the walls were keeping something in. I lay awake, staring into the dark. The room had no shape without the light, only the faint outline of the ceiling when I blinked. I wasn't sure why I couldn't sleep. My body was heavy, but my mind kept drifting in shallow circles. That's when I heard it, faint, so soft I thought it was part of a dream. My name, just once, barely a breath, drawn out, like someone exhaling through my thoughts. It came from near the door, a whisper that slid on the wood and touched the air beside my ear. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. The silence that followed felt too aware. I waited, seconds or maybe minutes. Then, again, my name, this time closer. the syllables breaking apart as if spoken through cloth. It wasn't a voice I recognized. Not exactly. But there was something familiar in the way it said my name. Slow, careful, almost kind. I turned toward the sound, eyes open to the dark. Nothing moved. The air near the wall shimmered faintly, like the shape of a breath that didn't belong to me. I could feel it on my skin, a cool pulse brushing across my arm. I whispered back, without meaning to, a single word. Who? No answer, just a slow drag of silence. Like the room was holding its breath again. I thought of getting up, turning on the light. But something inside me stayed still. IT didn't feel safe to move, as if movement would tell it I was listening, as if that mattered. Then the whisper came again, but not one voice, several. They overlapped, soft, overlapping murmurs, each one repeating my name, each one slightly off in the next. They moved through the dark, around the bed, behind the walls. The sound didn't echo. It folded, over and over until I couldn't tell where it began. I could hear it above me now, low, like wind trapped in the ceiling. My name again, but slower this time, dragged across the air like it weighed something. Every hair on my arm stood upright. The blankets felt heavy, almost wet. I couldn't tell if I was sweating or freezing. The voices grew quieter. Not gone, just retreating, like they were stepping back into the corners. And then, for a heartbeat, everything stopped. No hum, no breath, no sound at all. I stared into the dark until it began to move. At first, I thought it was a shadow from the dresser, but then it tilted, a shape, faint, gray, half there and trembling with the same rhythm as the whisper. It leaned closer, as though the air itself had bent toward me. When it spoke again, I felt it before I heard it. My name pressed against my ear, warm, steady, like someone kneeling just beside the bed. I shut my eyes. The room swayed. The whisper didn't fade. It stayed, hovering in the space between each heartbeat. It spoke my name one last time, and the air shifted. The cold withdrew. The silence broke. The hum of the building returned, faint but real. When I finally opened my eyes, the shape was gone. Only the curtains moved, barely stirring in the dark. I stayed awake until morning. The light came slow, spilling pale across the floorboards. Everything looked normal again, except the air near the door. It still shimmered faintly, like a breath hadn't fully left. When I stepped closer, I could almost hear it, a whisper too soft to understand. But it wasn't saying my name anymore. It was saying something else. Something that sounded like it was learning how to. It was raining that night. A slow, steady kind of rain that filled the air with its own quiet rhythm. The apartment smelled faintly of wet wood and cold metal. I had left the window cracked open for air. The curtains swayed just enough to move the shadows along the wall. Everything felt clean, calm, almost safe. I remember locking the bedroom door before lying down. Just habit. The click of the lock was small, reassuring. Sometime after midnight, I woke. The rain had stopped. The air was too still. My eyes were open, but my body wasn't listening. I tried to move, a hand, a breath. Nothing answered. It took a few seconds to understand. Sleep paralysis again. That frozen state between dreaming and waking. Only this time, something was different. The silence had weight, and the air, it felt wrong. Too thick, like it was holding its breath. I focused on the door. It was closed, just as I left it. The faint outline glowed gray under the streetlight from outside. I told myself to calm down, count the seconds, wait for my body to remember me. But the door, it moved. Not much, just a small, hesitant shake, like someone testing the handle from the other side. My heart stuttered. I watched as the handle twitched again. Once, then twice. It didn't turn, it shivered, metal vibrating as though something cold brushed against it. I couldn't breathe, couldn't even blink. The shadows near the bottom of the door started to shift, a thin darkness, creeping along the floorboards. It moved like water finding cracks. Slow, careful, searching. Then the knocking started. Not loud, soft, 3 faint taps, spaced far apart, almost polite. The sound trembled through the wood and into my chest. The air in the room thickened with every second that passed. Each tap seemed to pull something closer. I wanted to scream, but my throat was stone. My breath sat sharp behind my teeth, trapped. The knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It buzzed, low and constant, like static buried beneath the quiet. The handle turned, slowly this time, pressed down, then held there, like a hand that had forgotten what it meant to let go. The door didn't open. It just strained, creaking slightly against the frame. I could feel it, the pressure of something on the other side, something pushing without force, testing the edge of what was allowed. The shadows rippled again, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw them move upward, curling along the doorframe, spreading across the ceiling like veins. I shut my eyes, but even through the darkness behind my lids, I could see it, that faint, pulsing gray light bleeding from cracks. It wasn't a street light anymore. It flickered, slow, uneven, like something breathing through the wood. Then, a single whisper, right beside the door. Too soft to make out the words. Too close to mistake it for wind. My chest tightened. The weight of the paralysis pinned me harder. It felt like hands, not many, just two, pressing down gently, reminding me to stay still. The whisper came again, longer this time. A hush that scraped through the quiet, then broke off mid-breath. The light from under the door went out. The shadows froze in place. And in that frozen silence, I heard the faintest sound, the lock clicking open. Something on the other side breathed in, long, deep, like it had been waiting to exhale. I begged my body to move. My fingers, my jaw, anything, just one small motion. Nothing. The air beside me shifted. A cool drift brushing over my neck. Not from the window. This one carried warmth, moisture, a breath that didn't belong to me. Then the door creaked, slow enough that each inch of movement sounded like a sigh. But it didn't open all the way. It stopped halfway. A sliver of blackness filled the space between. I stared at that gap, every part of me waiting, listening. Something stood there, just beyond the frame, close enough for the darkness to thicken, close enough for the quiet to hum. And then it left. No sound of steps, no closing door, just the absence of presence, a hollow emptiness that seeped back into the air. My body released all at once, a rush of breath, sharp and shaking. The door was shut again, still locked. I didn't move until dawn. When the first light touched the floor, I saw the faint mark near the handle. 5 thin smudges, each one shaped like a handprint, facing inward. The heater had stopped working again. It was early winter, the kind that bit through the walls and settled into your bones. The apartment was too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice your own breathing. I pulled the blanket higher, watching the pale light from the street slide across the ceiling. Each car that passed left a faint reflection, a soft shimmer that moved like breath over the walls. I was half asleep when it started, a sudden drop in temperature, sharp and thin, like the air had been replaced with something older, something colder. My breath fogged faintly in front of me. I stared at it, watched the way it drifted and vanished into the stillness. There shouldn't have been fog. Not inside. Not like that. I turned onto my side, the sheets rough against my skin, the mattress creaking beneath me. The air felt heavier there, as if something waited in that narrow space between me and the wall. The room smelled faintly of dust and metal, like wet coins in forgotten corners. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just cold air, just my imagination. But then it breathed, not mine. Something behind me exhaled, slow, steady, deliberate. A thin chill brushed the back of my neck. It didn't move away. It lingered there, hovering just above the skin. Every hair on my body rose. The air that touched me was icy, but within it was warmth, a human kind of warmth. The blanket shifted against my shoulder, so slight, like fingers testing the weight of fabric. I froze, didn't move, didn't even blink. The breath came again, colder, longer this time. It moved across my skin as though tasting each inch of fear. I could feel it in my hair, a faint stirring, the way air moves when someone leans close enough to whisper. Nothing was said, just that quiet exhale, each one slower than the last, measured, It felt deliberate, enjoying how I couldn't react, enjoying that I was awake and aware. I tried to move my arm. It twitched but stayed trapped beneath the blanket. The cold crept lower, brushing along my shoulder, down my spine. The room pulsed faintly with light from outside, shadows moving like slow waves on the wall. Every flicker made it look as if someone else was breathing beside me. Then the exhale stopped. The silence that followed was thick. It pressed against my ears, heavy with something unspoken. I almost turned over. Almost. But a soft rustle froze me in place. Fabric shifting just behind my head. The mattress dipped, barely enough to notice, but enough to know. Something leaned closer. The air filled with that same metallic scent. Cold, wet, and faintly sweet like rusted sugar. Then came the next breath, right against my ear this time. I could feel the shape of it, the curve of invisible lips parting just enough to release the cold. It stayed there long enough for my skin to numb, long enough for my mind to start believing it was real. I didn't move, didn't dare, because if I turned, I'd have to see what was waiting. The breath faded slowly, but the cold didn't leave. It settled over me like fog, curling around my neck, sliding beneath the blanket. Each inhale I took came back colder, each exhale quieter. The air behind me stirred again. A faint shift, as if whoever, whatever it was, had leaned away. Then the mattress lifted, releasing the weight. The air loosened, but not completely. It felt like it was still there, watching, listening to the sound of my heart. I lay there until morning. The first pale light spilled across the floor, revealing the frost that had formed near the window. I sat up slowly. The room looked normal again, empty, but on the pillow beside me, a faint circle of condensation remained, like the trace of a breath that didn't belong to me. It started near the end of autumn. The nights had grown longer, and the house had started to feel too big for one person. The wind outside scraped against the windows, dragging loose leaves across the porch. Inside, everything was quiet, too quiet. I began noticing it during the evenings. That strange feeling, like I wasn't alone. I'd be reading, eyes low on the page, and something would shift in the corner of my vision, a soft flicker, like a figure stepping out of the dark, then gone the moment I looked. At first, I thought it was the lighting. The lamp in the living room buzzed faintly, casting uneven shadows that rippled across the walls. But the movements were too deliberate, too aware. Every night, it felt closer, a shape near the edge of my sight, never in front, never clear, but there. One night, I turned off the TV and sat in silence just to listen. The air had a weight to it, thick and patient, like it was waiting for me to make a mistake. The clock ticked softly. My own breathing felt too loud. And then I saw it, by the hallway. A shadow stretched longer than it should have been, taller than the frame of the door. It moved once, slowly, then stopped as soon as my eyes found it. I stared until my vision blurred. The shape didn't fade. It just stood there unmoving, as though it was watching me back. My hand trembled when I reached for the light switch. When the bulb flickered on, the shadow was gone. But the hallway felt colder. Empty, but not really. After that night, I kept the lights on. Every room, every corner. Still I could feel it. That presence just beyond my sight. Sometimes it shifted behind furniture. Sometimes near the ceiling. Always there, but never when I faced it. It wasn't just at home anymore. Walking down the street, I'd see reflections that didn't match my movement. A dark figure that turned half a second too late. Even at work, the glass doors, the polished floors, they all held glimpses of something wrong. A flicker of motion, gone when I focused. I stopped telling myself it was imagination. It felt too real, too consistent. One evening, I stood by the kitchen window, watching the last light fade. The glass reflected part of the room behind me. A faint outline of my shoulder, the table, the far wall, and then another outline, taller. Still, behind me, I turned fast. The room was empty, the chair still, the air unmoved, but the faint smell of damp earth lingered, like someone had come in from a rain. I sat there for a long time, hands cold against the wooden table. The silence hummed in my ears, and in that silence, the whisper of movement, something shifting just behind my left shoulder. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The instinct was too strong not to look. Whatever it was, it wanted to be unseen. It lived in that space between awareness and sight, where the mind starts to unravel what's real. The days passed slower after that. Sleep came less often. I'd wake in the middle of the night to the feeling of eyes in the dark. Sometimes the lamp would flicker, and for that split second, I'd see a shadow standing near the wall, arms too long, head tilted slightly toward me, then darkness again. Each time, my heartbeat echoed in my ears, like footsteps receding into another room. It never touched me, never spoke, just watched, and somehow that was worse. I began to sense it even in daylight, in reflections of picture frames, in the shimmer of a turned-off TV. A still figure, waiting. It stopped moving eventually, stopped hiding. Now it just stands there, where the corner of the room meets the edge of my sight. Perfectly still, perfectly quiet. I don't look anymore. I can't, because I know the moment my eyes find it completely, it won't stop watching. It'll start walking. It began on a cold Thursday night. The air was still, and the quiet hum of the house felt heavier than usual. The only light came from the ceiling lamp, a pale, yellow glow spilling across the floorboards. I remember thinking it looked weak, like it was struggling to stay alive. Outside, the wind was faint, pressing softly against the windows. The kind of silence that makes you listen harder, until you start to hear your own heartbeat. Then the light flickered. Just once. A brief, stuttering blink. I looked up. The bulb swayed slightly, as if the air above me had shifted. I waited, but it stayed steadied. I went back to what I was doing. But a few minutes later, it happened again, point one flicker. Then another, then darkness, a heartbeat of nothing. And then the light returned, brighter for a moment, as if gasping for AIR.M. My chest tightened. I told myself it was wiring. It had to be. Still, I couldn't stop staring. Every time it blinked, the shadows in the room seemed to move, longer, sharper, as if they were waiting for those seconds of dark to get closer. I stepped beneath the lamp, listening to the faint electric hum. The bulb pulsed once more, and I caught a glimpse. Something just beyond the edge of the light, a shape against the wall, where nothing should have been. When the light came back, it was gone that I felt the air grow colder. A thin metallic scent crept in, like rust or old rain. The silence pressed in from all sides. Another flicker. Longer this time. The dark stayed too long that in that gap, I thought I saw a movement. Something standing in the far corner, its edges soft, as if it didn't belong here. When the light steadied again, the corner was empty, but the walls looked different, like the shadows had rearranged themselves. I tried to breathe slowly. My pulse echoed in my ears. Each flicker felt closer, each blink of darkness like a heartbeat between worlds. Then the rhythm began. The light flashed on and off in a pattern. Slow, pause, quick pause, over and over. It almost sounded alive. Every time a room went dark, something shifted. The chair near the window wasn't where it had been. The rug looked wrinkled. The doorway narrower. I whispered into the empty air. Stop. But the light only blinked faster, the rhythm breaking into panic. On. Off. On. Off. I couldn't move. I didn't want to see what was there between the flashes. But I saw enough. A figure, closer each time. It didn't walk. It just appeared a little nearer, with every cut of darkness. Its shape was wrong. Too tall, shoulders tapering into nothing. And where its face should have been, there was only absence. The final flicker stretched too long. Darkness swallowed everything. I felt the air shift, cold and close against my neck. A breath, slow and deliberate. The light came back. I was alone. The figure was gone. But the bulb now glowed a dim, uneven orange, as if burned from the inside. I backed away, watching it pulse faintly, a slow heart-beating glass. The rest of the night passed in that half-light. Every few minutes it would dim, then flare again, never fully steady. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see it. That pattern of light, and the shadow waiting in between. Closer each time, just beyond the next flicker. It started small. A glass, half full of water, sitting on my nightstand beneath the pale glow of the streetlight outside. I remember placing it there, right on the coaster, beside my phone and keys. I always line them up neatly. Always. That night, the air felt heavier than usual, the kind of quiet that presses on your chest. I could hear my own breath, slow, uneven, mixing with the faint hum of the city through the window. I turned off the lamp, lay back, waited for sleep to come. When I opened my eyes again, the room looked different. Still dark, but not the same. The glass wasn't on the coaster anymore. It sat closer to the edge, only a few inches, but I knew I hadn't touched it. I stared at it for a long time, told myself I must have bumped the table, or maybe I'd imagined it. But when I reached out to check, the water inside rippled, as if something had just moved away. A small shiver crawled up my arm. I set the glass back in place, dead center, and turned over, facing the wall. I tried to steady my breathing, tried not to listen, but the quiet wasn't empty anymore. There was something beneath it, a faint rustle, a soft, careful shifting. When I looked again, the phone was lying face down. I never leave it like that. Its reflection in the glass caught a small tremor of light, like something had just passed in front of it. My skin prickled. The room felt smaller, tighter. I reached for the lamp. The switch clicked, but nothing, only darkness. In that blackness, I felt something subtle, a slow scrape, the edge of the coaster, sliding against wood. I couldn't see it, but I knew what was happening. The glass was moving again, by itself. A tiny tremor ran through the table, then stopped. I held my breath, waiting. The silence stretched thin, like a held note. Then a faint clink, the glass settling. When I turned the lamp again, it flickered weakly to life. Everything was still, but the glass was now on the far corner, near the edge of the table, as if someone had carefully placed it there. I felt a cold draft on my neck. The air conditioner was off. Still, the air around me moved, gentle, deliberate, almost like breathing. My phone screen lit up for a moment, white light flooding the wall beside me. In that reflection, I saw something faint. Not a person, just movement, like the shape of hands, too pale, hovering over the nightstand, and then gone. I sat up slowly. My heart felt loud. The air was too still again. I whispered into dark. "Who's there?" No answer, but something changed. The water in the glass began to tremble again, tiny ripples chasing each other in circles. Then it stopped completely, perfectly still, like it had never moved at all. I didn't sleep after that. I just sat there, watching. Every so often, the lamp would dim for a second, and I'd see it again, some small thing slightly out of place. The coaster turned sideways, the keys angled toward the edge, the drawer half open. Each time I blinked, something shifted, like the room was alive, rearranging itself in secret, when I wasn't looking. When dawn finally broke, everything looked normal again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been practicing, learning the space, learning me. And even now, each night before I sleep, I check the glass. I line up the keys. I turn the phone face up. Still, every morning, something is always just a little off, just enough to make me wonder what else moved while I wasn't awake. It was raining that night, the kind of slow, steady rain that seeps into everything, the walls, the sheets, the quiet. I had been lying awake for hours. The room was still, except for the faint ticking of the clock above the dresser. The mirror hung just beneath it, framed in old wood, its glass warped in places. I don't know why I kept looking at it. Maybe it was the way the streetlight outside bent through the wet window and spilled a soft, pale shimmer across the floor. It reached all the way to the mirror's edge where it broke, as if the light didn't want to touch what was inside. The reflection looked normal, mostly, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw something faint, a blur like a smudge on glass. Only it wasn't on the surface. It was behind the reflection. I blinked. It was gone. Or maybe it had never been there. The rain thickened outside. The room felt smaller, as if the walls were leaning in. I turned on the lamp. Warm light spread slowly, and for a second, everything looked safe again. I exhaled and watched my own reflection breathe with me. Then it didn't. The air caught in my throat. I leaned closer. My reflection was still eyes open, expression blank. It just stood there, a perfect image of me that had stopped being me. A soft hum filled my ears, like static. I stepped closer to the mirror, searching for the reason. But the closer I got, the colder the air became, a chill that felt alive, curling against my skin. My breath fogged the surface. And through the blur, I saw it, a figure, pale, indistinct, standing behind my reflection, too close, right over my shoulder. I turned around, nothing, just the empty room, the rain tapping against a window. When I looked back, the figure hadn't moved, still there, still watching. Its outline shifted softly, like smoke trapped in water. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel where its eyes should be, locked on me through the glass. My hand trembled as I reached out. The surface of the mirror felt warm, as if something was breathing beneath it. For a moment, I thought I saw fingers pressing from the inside, a faint distortion matching the shape of my hand. The hum grew louder, a vibration deep in my chest. And then, silence. The reflection blinked. Not me. It tilted its head just slightly. The movement small but wrong, a rhythm that didn't belong to my body. I stepped back, but my reflection didn't. It just stared, eyes wide, face empty. Behind it, the pale shape leaned closer, closer, until its outline touched the back of my reflection's neck. The glass rippled, a faint shimmer spreading outward, like heat distorting air. That I could feel it then, the pressure, a presence leaning in. Even though there was still nothing behind me, that MY voice caught in my throat. The air was heavy. The mirror seemed to breathe, in and out, slow and deep. Then the reflection smiled. Not wide, not grotesque, just enough to make my heart stop. I felt the muscles in my own face, still and frozen. It wasn't me. The lamp flickered. The rain slowed outside. The entire room dimmed, as if the light was being pulled toward the mirror. I tried to turn away, but my body wouldn't move. Only my eyes shifted back to that warped, shifting glass. The pale figure was gone. Only the reflection remained, still smiling, still wrong. And then it lifted its hand. Mine stayed at my side. The reflection pressed its palm to the glass, right where mine had been moments before. I watched the outline fade, slowly, until all that was left was my own face again. Expressionless. I backed away. Didn't turn the lamp off that night. Didn't sleep. When morning came, the mirror looked harmless, just wood and glass. But every now and then, when the rain returns and the light hits it the same way, I see it again. That faint shimmer just beyond my reflection, as if something is still standing there, waiting for me to look too long. It started 3 nights ago. The air was colder than usual, heavy with that still kind of silence that presses against your chest when you're alone. The house had always been quiet. Old wood, soft creaks, a faint hum from the heater in the hallway. I'd gotten used to those sounds, until the night I noticed the marks. They were on the wall right beside my bed. Faint, grayish shapes, smudged like fingerprints on glass, but larger, wider. I thought maybe I'd brush against the wall in my sleep. Maybe it was oil from my hands. I wiped them away, went back to bed. The next morning, they were gone. Clean, like the wall had never been touched. That should have been the end of it. But the next night, there were more. This time higher, almost near the ceiling. Dozens of them. Like someone had pressed both palms flat against the plaster, then dragged them downward, leaving faint trails of dust and moisture. When I touched them, they were cold, colder than the wall itself, and damp like condensation, but sticky. I pulled my hand back quickly. The smell clung to my fingers like something metallic. I didn't sleep that night. I kept watching the walls as the hours stretched thin. The streetlight outside flickered, sending shadows across the corners of the room, shifting with every pulse. Somewhere around 3, the air changed. Thicker, heavier, like the house had stopped breathing. The heater clicked off. Everything went still, and then a faint sound, a soft press, like skin meeting paint. I froze. The wall beside the dresser, just behind the mirror, had a new mark forming. Slowly, a handprint, appearing from nothing. as if someone on the other side was pressing through. Another one followed, smaller, then another, and another, until the whole wall seemed to shimmer with the faint outline of reaching hands. They weren't moving fast, just slow, dragging motions, leaving faint streaks that faded almost as soon as they appeared. I couldn't look away. My heart was pounding, but my body wouldn't move. Every breath felt loud. Too loud. One of the prints stopped halfway down the wall. It lingered longer than the rest. And then, so softly I almost missed it, the fingers twitched. I stumbled back, hit the edge of the bed. The wall was still now, the prints fading, leaving only faint, wet outlines. By morning, everything was clean again. No marks, no smell, just a pale wall, empty and still. I tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, or maybe mold. Something simple, something explainable. But last night they came back. Not on one wall this time. All of them, around the doorway, beside the window, above the headboard. Hundreds of faint, overlapping prints, each one colder than the air around it. I could see the shape of palms, some too long, some too narrow, the way they curved toward the floor. It looked like they were reaching down. I didn't move until dawn. When the first light touched the room, the prints began to fade. Not all at once. In pieces, like something pulling away. Now the walls look clean again, but the air still feels damp. Every time I pass the hallway, I can smell that faint metallic scent. Clinging to the corners, waiting. Last night, I thought I heard something in the walls. Not a creak, not pipes, a rhythm. Soft, slow taps, like fingers drumming just beneath the surface. I stood there listening, feeling the cold spread up my spine. And when I turned on the light, I saw it again, just for a second, a single handprint pressed against the wall beside my face. Fresh, dripping faintly down the paint. I didn't touch it this time. I just watched as it slowly faded into the white. It's quiet now, but I know when the night comes, when the heater shuts off and the air turns still, they'll return, not just on the walls, maybe on the floor, or the sheets, or my skin. It started with a flicker, just above the bed, barely there, a faint shift in the pale ceiling light. I thought it was my eyes, that tired, watery kind of vision you get after staring too long at the dark. But then it moved again. Something slid along the ceiling. Slow. Crawling. The light didn't change, but the shadow did. Long, thin streaks of darkness, spreading like cracks in paint. I blinked. They were gone. The room was still. The old clock on the dresser ticked softly. The faint hum of the fridge downstairs carried to the floorboards. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. But I couldn't shake the image. That movement above me. Too fluid to be light. Too deliberate to be my imagination. The next night it came back. I was half asleep when I noticed it. The ceiling had changed again. The shadows were thicker this time, gathered in corners, stretching toward the middle. They didn't move at first. They waited, like they were listening. The air felt heavy, my chest slow to rise. Every breath came out shallow, visible in the faint cold of the room. Then one of the shadows began to shift. It slid along the ceiling beam, pausing above me, its shape curling, jointed, like bent limbs. The others followed. I could see their forms now, not full, not solid, just impressions of movement. They crawled without sound, without gravity, passing over the light without dimming it. I didn't move. I just watched. Their movements were rhythmic, a slow, crawling pace, like something searching for warmth. Every few seconds, one would stop directly over me, its shape thinning into a streak, as if it was pressing closer. The room was silent except for my breathing, and I could hear it, that faint, almost wet dragging that came from above, like fingertips brushing the plaster. I wanted to run, but every part of me felt pinned down, heavy, like their weight hung over me even though they weren't touching. I kept staring up, waiting for the next one to move. But then something changed. The ceiling was lower, not by much, just enough for me to notice the corners were darker, the edges softer. It was like the ceiling itself was leaning closer, drawn down by the movement that writhed within it. A drop of something cold landed on my cheek. Thin, sticky. I wiped it away, but the mark it left tingled, as if tiny legs had brushed across my skin. More droplets followed, scattered, faint, falling in rhythm with the crawling above. I pulled the blanket up, covering my face, but I could still feel them. Through the fabric, that faint vibration, like something dragging itself along the surface. The air felt electric, too still, too quiet. When I finally dared to look again, the shadows had stopped. They hung motionless, spread wide across the ceiling, black stains on pale paint. And then, in the dim flicker of the light, one of them turned its head. There was no face, just a hollow space that swallowed what little light touched it. But I felt it watching me. The crawling started again, faster this time, circling, clinging to the cracks and corners, until it looked like the entire ceiling was alive. I pressed myself against the wall, too scared to blink. They didn't fall. They didn't reach. They just moved around and around, like they were waiting for something. When morning came, the ceiling was bare again. Not a mark, not a stain. Only a faint smell like burnt dust and damp cloth. I told myself it was a dream, that I'd imagined it, until I looked down. On the blanket near my chest were tiny black smears, 4 lines and a thumb-shaped mark. Fingerprints, pressed into the fabric. I didn't sleep the next night, but it didn't matter. The shadows came anyway. Even with the lights on, they still moved, crawling across the pale ceiling, slow and careful, as if they knew I could see them now. Sometimes they stop right above me and stay there for hours. And sometimes when I blink, I swear I see one of them drop just a little lower. It was a quiet night, too quiet. The kind of stillness that makes you listen harder, as if the air itself is waiting for something to happen. The hallway outside my room was dark, just a narrow stretch of shadow between the pale light of my door and the faint orange glow from the kitchen night bulb. I should have been asleep, but my mind wouldn't rest. Every creak of the house felt heavier. Every shift of the air had weight. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, counting my breaths to keep calm. And that's when I heard it. A voice. Soft, low, distant. It came from a hallway, just beyond the half-closed door. At first, it was only a whisper, a sound I could almost mistake for the wind moving through the vent. But then it spoke my name. Quietly, deliberately. The voice was neither male nor female. Just human. Human enough to feel real. Human enough to chill me to the bone. My heart started to thump. Slow, heavy beats that I could feel in my throat. I thought maybe someone had come home. But I lived alone. No one should have been there. The voice came again. Closer this time. Like it had taken a few careful steps toward my door. It said my name once more, and something else after, words I couldn't make out, low and drawn, like someone trying not to wake the house. I pulled the blanket up, my fingers trembling. I told myself it was the pipes, the walls, a trick of the mind. But then I heard the floorboard creak. Just one, right outside my door. The air in the room shifted. Cooler, thinner. I could feel it move against my face, like someone exhaling slowly in the dark. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see what was there. But my eyes were already on the door. The gap beneath it glowed faintly. A thin line of orange in the kitchen light. And then that light dimmed, as if something had passed in front of it. Another step. Another whisper. Still my name. This time, I heard the breath in it. The faint rasp of the throat close to the wood. It waited, like it knew I was listening. The silence between each sound stretched until it hurt. I couldn't tell if I was breathing or holding my breath anymore. Then came the knock. Soft, barely there. Just 2 gentle taps against the doorframe. Not a request. Not a threat. Something in between. The voice followed. It said my name again, but slower now, as if savoring it. And then it whispered, "Come here." My skin turned cold. Every instinct in me screamed to stay still. But I couldn't help the way my eyes moved toward that thin, flickering line of light beneath the door. Something shifted outside. A faint scrape, like bare feet dragging against the wood. I tried call out to say, "Who's there?" but my voice caught in my throat. Only a weak sound escaped, more breath than word. For a moment, everything stopped. No whisper, no movement, just silence. Then, so slowly I almost didn't catch it, the doorknob turned. Not all the way, just enough for it to click once. I stared at it, frozen, watching it tremble slightly, a subtle twist, like a trembling hand on the other side. It held there for a long moment, then released. The hallway went silent again. I waited, minutes, maybe more. The quiet pressed down on me until I couldn't bear it. When I finally moved, I did it slowly, pulling the blanket down, sliding one foot off the bed. The floor was cold. My legs shook as I stood. I crossed to the door, each step quieter than breath. When I reached it, I paused, my ear just an inch from the wood. Nothing. No whisper. No steps. But when I looked down, I noticed something. The light beneath the door was gone. The hallway was completely dark. And then, from that darkness, the voice came again, right against the door this time. Not a whisper anymore, just a low, steady breath. And a single word, drawn out like a secret meant only for me. Open. I didn't. I couldn't. I stepped back, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the doorknob, waiting for it to move again. It never did. The voice never came back that night. But sometimes, when a house grows too quiet, I think I hear it again, somewhere down the hallway, soft, familiar, waiting for me to listen. It happened just after midnight. The hum of the house was steady. Refrigerator, heater, the faint buzz of a street lamp through the curtains. Everything felt normal, safe, almost. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, bare feet pressed to the wooden floor, watching the pale glow of my phone screen fade to black. Then the light flickered once, twice, and vanished. All of it, the lamp, the street light, the tiny red dot on the power strip, gone. I was swallowed in a silence, so thick it felt alive. Not a flicker of light anywhere. Not even the faint blue hue that usually seeps through the window from the world outside. I blinked, but it made no difference. The dark didn't change. It wasn't the kind of darkness that waited for your eyes to adjust. It was complete, the kind that pressed against your face when you tried to breathe. At first, I sat very still, telling myself it was just a power cut, that the lights would return in a second or two. They didn't. Instead, I began to notice other things. The faint rustle of fabric, like something brushing the corner of the room. The uneven rhythm of my own breath, too loud, too shaky. I held it, and in that pause, I heard another, breathing, not mine, slow, measured, somewhere close. The kind of sound you don't want to locate, because that would mean you were right about where it came from. I turned slightly, hands sliding along the edge of the mattress, searching for my phone. My fingers found nothing but the cool fabric of the sheet. The air felt heavy, as though the darkness itself had weight. Every tiny movement seemed magnified. The creak of the floorboards beneath the bed, the whisper of air moving to the narrow crack of the door. I wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the moment my lips parted, that other breath stopped, like it had been listening. The silence that followed was unbearable. It stretched and thinned until even my heartbeat felt intrusive. Then, from somewhere in front of me, a soft tap, wood against wood. I froze. It came again, a slow, deliberate rhythm, like fingers drumming against the wall, one by one, steady, unhurried. I felt the back of my neck prickle. My body begged to move, to run, to do something, but the dark made every direction feel wrong. So I stayed still, listening. The tapping stopped, and for a moment there was nothing. Then the breathing returned, closer, lower. It was right in front of me now. I could feel it, cool air brushing the space between my eyes and lips. It stayed there, not moving, not pulling away, just breathing. I whispered, "Who was there?" But my voice barely existed. It came out dry and thin, like it didn't belong to me anymore. No answer, only a slow exhale, almost like a sigh, and then a whisper, too faint to understand, but too clear to mistake for the wind. It lingered, as though the darkness itself was trying to form words. My hand brushed the nightstand, found the edge of my phone. Cold, smooth. I gripped it hard, thumb pressing against the power button. Nothing. No glow. No screen. Dead. The air changed again, a subtle shift of warmth leaving the room. A scent rose, damp and metallic, like earth after rain. That's when I heard movement, a shuffle near the far wall. Then another, and another, soft, dragging, unhurried. I tried to count the distance between us, but the dark made everything endless. The steps stopped. A faint click followed, metal against metal. It came from the door, the handle, turning. I wanted to run, but the dark held me in place. I could feel my pulse in my palms and my throat in the hollow space behind my eyes. Then, as quietly as it had come, the sound faded. The handle stilled. The breathing stopped. The air grew still again. For a long time, I sat there, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. The silence returned to normal, if silence could ever feel normal again. And then, without warning, the lights came back. The lamp flickered to life. The streetlight glowed outside, and the room looked exactly as it had before. Everything was still in place. Nothing moved. No one there, except, on the wall, near the door, 5 small marks. Dark, smudged, like the faint trace of fingertips dragged slowly across the paint. I stared at them until the light began to hum again, until I almost convinced myself they were shadows. But I know what I felt in that darkness. The cold breath, the whisper, the silence that watched me breathe. And now, every time the lights flicker, even for a second, I find myself holding my breath again, waiting for the dark to remember me. It was raining that night, a slow, steady rain, the kind that seeps into everything, the air, the walls, the skin. I'd left the window open just a crack. The room smelled faintly of wet earth and rust. The curtains swayed with each quiet breath of wind. It was late, too late for anyone to be awake. The house had a stillness to it, the kind that only exists when every clock seems to hold its breath. I remember sitting on the floor, back against the bed, light from the hallway spilling a soft line across the carpet. I wasn't thinking of anything in particular, just letting the hum of the night settle around me. Then, a shift. The air changed as if something unseen had moved through it. At first, I thought it was the rain, a shadow, maybe the branches outside brushing against the window pane. But the shape didn't move like that. It stood still, perfectly still, right at the doorway. A tall outline, faint but solid enough to break the light. The kind of darkness that feels heavier than the dark around it. I stared for too long before I realized I'd stopped breathing. There was no sound, no footsteps, no creak of the floor. Just that figure, standing where the hallway ended and the room began. Something inside me whispered not to move, that if I stayed still it might fade, but my eyes wouldn't look away. I blinked once. The outline remained. Blink again, and it leaned slightly forward, not walking, just bending toward me as though listening. A pulse began to throb in my ears. I could feel in my throat, in my hands. The light behind the figure flickered, only for a second, but in that brief dimming, the shape seemed closer. A breath caught in my chest. I whispered, barely audible, "Who's there?" Nothing, only the steady drip of water from the roof outside. The rain didn't help. It felt too distant now. The silence inside the room was larger, like a held breath that never released. I reached for the small lamp beside me. My fingers trembled against the switch. When the bulb flickered to life, the doorway was empty, just air, just a hallway. I waited, eyes stinging from the sudden light. Everything was still again, but the air, it hadn't gone back to normal. It was colder, thicker, and that faint metallic smell, stronger now. I stood, moving toward the door with slow, uneven steps. The floor creaked softly beneath me. Each step felt too loud, too intrusive. At the threshold, I paused. The hallway was empty, but the shadows along the walls seemed to breathe. Long, soft stretches of black that shifted when I blinked. I told myself to look down, to make sure there was nothing near my feet. But when I glanced at the floor, I noticed something else. A faint reflection on the hardwood. A shape standing behind me. I turned, fast, too fast, and the room was empty again. The lamp light hummed faintly, casting soft circles across the wall. No figure, no movement, just the quiet rhythm of rain. I backed toward the bed, every nerve in my body listening. The air trembled once, as if the room exhaled, and then, so faint I almost missed it, a slow creak came from the doorframe, wood shifting under unseen weight. I stared at it, waiting for the next sound. It didn't come, only the stillness, only the quiet, and the uneasy knowledge that something had been there, something that now wasn't. I turned off the lamp, telling myself I needed the dark to feel normal again. But when the room went black, the image of that silhouette didn't fade. It stayed, burned into the back of my eyes, tall, unmoving, standing at the edge of the room. I lay down, facing the wall, and tried to sleep. But every time my eyes drifted shut, I saw the same faint outline, right where the door met the dark, waiting, watching. And sometimes when the rain grows quiet, I still feel it there, the weight of its presence just beyond the light. It started on a Sunday night, cold air slipping through the cracks of the old house, the kind that smells faintly of dust and damp wood. I couldn't sleep. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the walls still held the echo of it, a slow, heavy drip somewhere deep inside the plaster. I was lying in bed, the blanket pulled to my chin, listening to the quiet hum that filled the room. Then I heard it, a beat, soft, rhythmic, steady, like a pulse, buried in the wall behind my head. At first, I thought it was the pipes. Old houses do that sometimes. They breathe, they shift, but this was too deliberate, too alive. Thump, pause, thump. Each beat matched the rise and fall of my chest. I held my breath, and the sound stopped. When I exhaled, it began again, slowly, deeply, almost as if the wall were listening to me. I pressed my hand against the cold surface. It felt damp, like condensation gathering on the paint, and beneath it, a faint vibration, steady, pulsing, alive. The rhythm wasn't constant anymore. It grew faster when I leaned closer, then slower when I pulled away, like it could feel me. The room suddenly felt smaller, as though the walls had shifted closer in the dark. I turned on the lamp. The light made the air look dusty, pale motes drifting between me and the wall. Nothing moved, but the heartbeat continued, softer now, as if hiding behind the glow. I stood there for a long time, my hand still pressed against the wall, the hum of it sinking into my skin. I tried tapping once, a nervous, quiet knock. For a moment, nothing, then 3 slow thuds answered back. My throat tightened. I stepped back, my heart racing in a way that didn't feel like my own. The beats blended together, mine and the one inside the wall, until I couldn't tell which belonged to me. I turned the light off again, hoping the dark would calm it. It didn't. The heartbeat grew louder, thicker, like it was pressing out from the inside, trying to find a way through. The air in the room trembled with it. I could hear faint cracking, tiny pops in the paint along the wall, as if something underneath was pushing forward. I whispered, "Stop." It didn't. It only paused long enough to make me believe it had listened. Then it resumed, heavier than before. Thump, thump, thump. The plaster seemed to move with each pulse. The shadows trembled, and just beneath the surface, a faint outline began to appear. Something round, pressing outward, the size of a hand. I felt dizzy. My skin prickled with cold. The outline pulsed once, then retreated, leaving behind a dark, damp circle that slowly faded into the paint. I couldn't stay in the room after that. I left the lamp on and went into the hallway, sitting there in the dim light until my breathing slowed. From where I sat, the heartbeat was faint, almost gone, but not completely. I could still feel it vibrating through the floor, reaching into the wooden beams of the house. It moved when I moved. It followed, a living echo under my feet. By morning, the house was quiet again. No pulsing, no damp patches, nothing. But when I walked past a wall, my chest tightened, a flutter of panic I couldn't explain. I stopped just long enough to listen, and from deep within the plaster, so soft I might have imagined it, came a single, slow beat, in sync with mine. Then another, and another, as if the house was breathing with me, waiting for me to stop so it could take the next one alone. It started small, the kind of thing I almost didn't notice. The chair by the window, just a little out of place. It was an old wooden thing, paint chipped along the edges. The seat dipped slightly in the middle, like it had held too many quiet hours. Every morning, it faced a window toward the pale light that seeped in through the curtains. But one night, when I woke to drink some water, it wasn't facing the window anymore. It was turned toward me. The legs scraped slightly across the floorboards, as if it had been dragged. But I hadn't moved it. I remember standing there in the dim blue glow from the streetlight, staring at that empty chair. It looked wrong, too deliberate, too still. I pushed it back to its place, told myself it must have been me, half asleep, maybe brushing against it. But the next night, it had turned again. This time, it faced the bed directly. I could see the top edge of its backrest through the darkness. A dark outline, silent, waiting. The room felt heavier somehow, the air thicker, each breath slower, as if the night itself were holding me down. I didn't get up that time. I just lay there, watching it through half-open eyes, pretending to sleep. At some point, I could have sworn I saw it move. Just a slight shift, barely enough to notice. A tilt, a creak. The shadows bent around it, like they were breathing. But when I blinked, it was still again. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was expectant, like something was listening. By morning, I tried to laugh it off. I pushed the chair back to the wall, angled it so it pointed away from the bed entirely. I even marked its legs with chalk, for faint white lines on the dusty floor. I told myself, if it moved again, I'd know for sure. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too still. The clock had stopped ticking. Even the wind outside had gone quiet. And in that silence, I heard it, a single, slow scrape across the floorboards. Not loud, not sudden, just enough to lift every hair on my arms. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The scrape came again, shorter this time, closer. Then nothing. The kind of stillness that presses against your ribs, that makes you aware of your heartbeat and the weight of your eyes trying not to open. I turned my head just a little and saw it. The chair was closer now, halfway between the window and the bed, facing me, its legs perfectly aligned, like it had been placed there by careful hands. The chalk lines were still visible behind it, empty space where it used to stand. I didn't get out of bed, didn't even sit up. I just watched it. The room smelled faintly of old wood and something colder, like rain-soaked metal. My breath fogged slightly in the air, and as my eyes adjusted, I thought I saw something resting in the chair, a darker patch among the shadows. Not moving, not clear enough to see, just a presence. A weight. The air around it trembled, a faint shimmer in the dark. Then I blinked, and the shape was gone. The chair remained, quiet and waiting. By morning, it had returned to its place by the window. The chalk lines were untouched. The floor was clean. No marks, no proof, only that strange indentation on the seat. Deeper now, like something had sat there all night. Every night since, I've tried to ignore it. But sometimes when I wake in the dark, I can feel it facing me again. I don't need to look. I can sense the weight of it, angled toward my bed, still and patient. I've stopped marking the floor, stopped moving it back, because whatever keeps turning that chair wants to be seen. And I'm too afraid that one night, if I stare long enough, it won't be empty anymore. It started on a quiet night in late November, the kind where the air feels heavy, and every sound seems swallowed before it reaches your ears. The house was still, too still, only the soft hum of the heater and the faint rustle of trees outside. I remember lying in bed, watching the pale light from the street spill across the ceiling. Half awake, half somewhere else. That's when I felt it. A weight across my legs. Slow, steady, pressing down. Not hard enough to hurt, but enough to keep me still. My breath caught. The blanket barely moved with my chest. I didn't open my eyes right away. Something in me whispered not to. The room felt colder beneath that weight, as if something thick and unmoving had settled on top of the bed. When I finally looked, I saw it, a dark shape stretched across the blanket, wide, low, like smoke that refused to drift away. It wasn't shaped like a person. Not really. It was just wrong. The edges shimmered faintly, blending into the dark like ink spreading through water. I couldn't hear anything from it, but the silence it brought had its own kind of sound, a deep, pulsing quiet that seemed to echo inside my chest. My fingers twitched beneath the covers. The weight pulsed once, then pressed harder. My heart tried to fight it, beating against that invisible heaviness, but the harder it beat, the heavier it became. I tried to whisper something, a name maybe or a prayer I half remembered, but the air wouldn't leave my throat. The dark shape shifted slightly, a slow, sliding movement toward my chest. I could feel the blanket stretch, the air sink. The scent of old dust and cold metal filled my nose. It leaned closer, not with movement, but with presence, like it wanted to understand my breath. I stared at it until my eyes began to burn, until every shadow in the room blurred into one. And then it was gone. The pressure vanished. The air rushed back into my lungs with soft, broken gasp. I sat up too quickly, the sheets cold and damp with sweat. Nothing there, just a quiet glow of dawn starting to slip through the curtains. The room looked the same, untouched, but when I reached out to smooth the blanket, the fabric was warm where the shadow had been. Not just for me, warmer, like something else had lingered there. I didn't sleep the next night, or the one after, but it didn't matter. Even when my eyes stayed open, I could feel it, waiting. Some nights, I'd catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of my vision. Something dark, flattened against the bed, melting into the folds of the blanket. Other times, it would come when I closed my eyes, the same pressure, the same silence creeping beneath my ribs. Once, I turned on every light in the room, let them burn until morning, but the weight still came. Light didn't matter. Doors didn't matter. It was already part of the house, part of me. There were no footprints, no marks, nothing disturbed. But sometimes in daylight, I'd see the sheets slightly wrinkled, as if something had rested there for hours, just watching me breathe. I've tried sleeping on the couch, on the floor, even standing by the window until sunrise. But no matter where I go, I wake up back in bed, always on my back, always under that faint, invisible pressure. Now, I don't fight it. When the air thickens and the dark folds over me again, I just listen. The silence hums. The warmth gathers across my chest. And I swear, sometimes I can feel it breathing back. Slow, careful, perfectly in sync with mine, like it's trying to match me, to learn what it means to be alive. It started one night in early winter. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels too careful, like it's waiting for something to happen. I'd turn off the lights hours ago, but sleep wouldn't come. The air felt heavy, thick with that faint, humming stillness that only comes after midnight. I lay there listening to the faint tick of the clock, counting, breathing, waiting. Then I felt it, a soft warmth against my ear, like someone leaning close, too close. The breath brushed across my skin, slow, steady, deliberate, and then it whispered, not loud, not clear, just words barely formed, trapped between silence and air. I froze. It said my name first, drawn out as if tasting it. Then it spoke again, only this time. It wasn't words from anyone I knew. It was my own voice, soft, trembling, repeating things I'd buried deep in the back of my mind. My fears, the ones I never said out loud. Each breath carried one. Each whisper sounded like me. You left the door unlocked. You shouldn't have gone back there. You know what's waiting when the lights go out. I wanted to move, to turn over, to look, but my body wouldn't listen. The warmth lingered at my ear, slow, rhythmic, as though it was breathing in time with me. Every exhale felt closer, wetter, human. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that maybe it was a vent, the wind, a trick of sleep. But then it whispered again, "Don't pretend you can't hear me." The voice was mine, exactly mine. The same tone, the same quiet panic I felt rising inside. It began repeating everything I thought, each sentence a half second after I thought it. Please stop. Please stop. The same words, the same rhythm, like a reflection I couldn't shut out. I clenched my eyes shut and counted. 1, 2, 3, but the breath moved lower, across my jaw, down the side of my neck. It was warm, but the air around me stayed cold. Then came the sound of breathing. Not in my ear anymore, but inside it, like someone had crawled into the space just behind my thoughts. The whisper changed. It began naming things around the room. The chair in the corner, the cracks in the ceiling, the shadow under the bed. Each word matched perfectly to what I saw when I dared open my eyes. It knew where I was looking. It followed my gaze. The whisper started to laugh, a small, shaky thing, but it wasn't cruel. It was curious, as if learning how to be something it shouldn't. When I finally found my voice, it came out as a dry whisper. "Who are you?" It didn't answer. It just breathed again, long, slow, patient. Then, in my own voice, it whispered, "You know me." I turned over, but the bed was empty. The air still moved, though, warm against my cheek. I pressed my hands over my ears. Still there, inside, behind the bones and the silence. I could feel each word before it spoke. You can't block a breath. The whisper grew faint then, pulling away, as if sinking into the walls. The warmth faded. The air cooled. I stayed awake until the sun rose, listening for it to return. It didn't. Not that night. Not the one after. But sometimes when a room goes still and my thoughts begin to slip into that quiet place between waking and sleep, I feel it again. That gentle warmth near my ear. That almost human breath. It doesn't always speak. Sometimes it just listens. But when it does whisper, it no longer repeats my fears. Now, it tells me things before I think them. Little truths. Little warnings. Don't look at the window. Don't answer the door. Don't breathe too loud. And then it laughs, softly, lovingly, like it's proud of me for listening. It was late November when the air turned sharp. Nights felt longer then, the kind that pressed in around the house, making every window a mirror. I'd been sleeping lightly, restless. Something about the wind didn't sound like wind anymore. That night, I woke to the faintest tap. Once, then again. At first, I thought it was just the branches. The tree outside had always scraped the glass when it rained, but it wasn't raining, and the air was still. The clock on my nightstand read 2:14 a.m. The tapping came again, slow, deliberate, from the window near my bed. I could see it from where I lay. The glass looked darker than it should have, like the night had thickened on the other side. I sat up. The blanket slid from my shoulders, and the cold reached in like it had been waiting. For a long moment, nothing. Then tap, 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 rhythmic, measured. Something in me said not to move closer, but I did. Each step across the floorboards felt louder than the last. The air felt heavier near the window, thick with the kind of silence that feels alive. I reached for the latch. It was locked. I didn't remember locking it. I never did. The tapping stopped. For a moment, I thought whatever it was had gone. But as I turned away, I heard a faint scrape against the frame. Not on the glass. Under it, like fingers. I backed up slowly, watching the window as if it could breathe. Then I saw it. A shadow shift across the glass. Not a person's shadow. Too tall, too thin. It moved like it was pressed against the pane, sliding soundlessly, as if trying to see in. I stood there, bare feet on the cold floor, heart pacing against the silence. And then the latch moved, just slightly. It rattled once, then again, as if someone was trying from the other side. The window didn't open. It couldn't. The lock was holding, but it wanted to. I could hear the faint hum of the glass vibrating. Something steady beneath the surface, like a breath caught between two worlds. I stepped closer, until I could see my reflection. And then I saw something else. Behind me, that a shape, standing in the dark of my room, that I spun around. But nothing was there, only the faint smell of cold air and the soft creak of the floorboards settling. When I turned back, the shadow outside was gone. But the latch was no longer where it had been. It was fully sealed now, pressed down tight, as though someone had locked it from outside. I tried to lift it. It wouldn't move, not even a little. My hands started to shake. I pulled harder, feeling the wood strain. The frame groaned under my grip. Nothing. The air behind the glass grew pale, like mist gathering on the other side. And then the tapping started again. Faster this time. Harder. I could feel it through the glass. Each knock carried a faint vibration through the window, through my fingertips. I backed away. The tapping followed, matching my steps, slowing only when I stopped. Then silence, a pause, and a single muffled breath. Close. It came from just beyond the glass, as if someone was leaning their face against it. I didn't dare move, didn't blink. Then something pale brushed against the pane. A fingertip, long, colorless. It dragged across the glass, leaving no mark, no trace. Only the faintest sound of skin and cold. I stood there until morning light crept through the cracks in the curtains. The window looked normal again, still locked, completely still. When I tried the latch that morning, it lifted easily. The wood no longer groaned. Everything was just as it should have been, except on the outside, in the thin layer of frost, there was a single handprint, pressed flat against the glass, larger than mine. And on the frame, just below the latch, a small carved line, as if something sharp had traced a word there. I leaned closer, squinting at it in the cold light. It said, "Don't open it tonight." It was early winter. The house had gone quiet in that heavy way it does when snow threatens. Every sound feels swallowed. Every breath lingers. I'd been staying in the old guest room for a few nights, the one with a crooked lamp and the yellowed curtains that never fully closed. It was just after midnight. The light from the hallway bled faintly under the door, enough to shape the corners of the room into shadows. I was half awake when I noticed it. Something was off about the wall across from the bed. The shadows didn't look right. They were thicker, too defined. I blinked, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks. But when I sat up, they moved. Not fast, not jerking, just sliding, like smoke being pulled toward the corner. The room was still. No wind, no movement but mine. Yet the dark on the far wall gathered itself, folded into the space near the dresser, and stayed there. I watched it for a long time. It didn't flicker like normal shadow. It held shape, a soft curve where a shoulder might be. When I leaned forward, it melted into the wall. Gone. I stared at the spot until my eyes watered. Then I lay back down, convincing myself it was nothing. But the longer I listened to the quiet, the more aware I became of breathing. Not mine. Something shallow, near the corner. The air felt different there, thicker somehow, still cold, but with a weight that didn't belong. I turned my head slowly. The wall looked empty. The corner looked empty. And yet, when I shifted my foot beneath the blanket, I saw it again, a movement, a soft pull toward the baseboard, like something retreating. Every hair on my arms lifted. I could feel it, the sense of being watched, not by eyes, but by something that understood the shape of my fear. I whispered, so quietly it was barely a sound, "Who's there?" The air pressed tighter around me, and in the faint glow from the hallway, I saw another shape form, this time near the wardrobe. It wasn't tall, not like a person, more like the outline of a crouched thing. It shifted once, then froze. As soon as I sat up again, it dissolved, like ink dispersing in water, gone before I could blink. The silence that followed didn't feel natural. It hummed in my ears, a deep, almost pulsing quiet that made me aware of my heartbeat. I turned on the lamp beside the bed. The light buzzed softly, casting pale warmth across the room. The corners looked empty again, but in that light, the wallpaper near the floor seemed darker, as if something had brushed against it. I leaned closer. It wasn't dirt. It wasn't shadow either. It was a faint imprint, like a smear left by a damp hand. I touched it, cold. My fingers came away clean, but the moment I pulled back, the shape began to fade. It bled into the wall like it was being swallowed. I stepped back quickly, my breath sharp in my throat. That was when I realized the light had dimmed. Not by much, just enough that the corners deepened again, thick and shapeless. And in that half-light, something moved behind me. I turned fast, too fast, and the lamp flickered. There was a figure near the door. Or maybe not a figure, just a suggestion of one, a darker patch within the dark. It leaned slightly forward, as if aware I could see it. My hand hovered over the lamp switch. but I couldn't bring myself to touch it. The shape twitched, and then slipped quietly into the farthest corner of the room. I waited, eyes locked on the shadows. I thought I saw it breathe once more, a ripple through the dark, a soft collapse of form. And then nothing, only the steady hum of the bulb, only my pulse, loud and uneven. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, the corners looked ordinary again, too ordinary. The wallpaper was dry. The air was still. But when I looked closely beneath the edge of the bed, I found a small patch of darker wood, faint, circular, like something had been resting there, watching. And when I blinked, it faded, melting into the floorboards until there was no trace it had ever been there at all. It started just after midnight. The city outside was quiet in that strange, hollow way it gets during rain. A soft drizzle, a low hum of traffic somewhere far away. Everything felt muted, distant. I was sitting on the couch, reading. The lamp beside me flickered once, and then I heard it. A cry, faint. So faint I almost thought it was wind. It came from above. Or maybe beyond the wall. I couldn't tell. A single, short sound, sharp enough to make my breath catch. Then silence. The building settled again. Pipes clicked. Someone turned off a faucet 2 floors down. I waited for it to happen again. It didn't. I tried to keep reading, but every few seconds my eyes lifted, listening for something that wasn't there. The air felt strange, like the walls were holding their breath. When it came again, it was softer, longer, a cry but muffled, as though trapped inside concrete. I stood up this time. The book slipped from my lap, its spine landing with a soft thud on the rug. The ceiling looked normal. No cracks, no stains, but the sound had weight. It came from somewhere. I went to the hallway, bare feet on cold tile. The fluorescent light above buzzed faintly. I listened. The air conditioner rattled, then went still. And again the cry, not loud, but real. It floated through the corridor like smoke, filling the space between doors, curling around the corners. I stared at the apartment above mine. The lights were off. They'd been empty for weeks. The landlord had said no one had moved in yet. But now, something was there. I could hear movement, a soft dragging sound, then silence again. I pressed my palm flat against the wall. It felt cold, vibrating faintly, as if something on the other side was moving against it. I whispered, "Hello?" Nothing, only the slow, steady drip of rain against the window, only the air shifting through vents. I went back to my living room, turned off the lamp, waited. The darkness felt heavier without the light, and then, beneath it, a faint hum, like someone breathing through fabric, followed by another cry. It was closer now, but not from above. It came from the far side of the room, from the wall near the window. I froze. My heartbeat matched the rhythm of the rain. There was no building next to mine, just a narrow alley outside, empty. I approached the window slowly. The glass was fogged with condensation. I wiped it with my sleeve. The alley was dark, only the dull reflection of streetlights glinting on wet bricks. But in that quiet space between buildings, I thought I saw something. A shadow standing still, head tilted upward, as if listening. The shape didn't move, didn't breathe. The cry came again. It was right there, but the shape didn't open its mouth. It didn't even shift. The sound came from everywhere at once, the walls, the floor, inside my own ears. I stepped back, nearly tripping over the rug. The cry turned into a low moan, drawn out, and then gone. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. It pressed in from all sides, thick, unrelenting. I stood in the dark, waiting for it to start again. Nothing. The building was still, completely still. After a while, I turned the lamp back on. The light felt weak, like it barely reached corners. The ceiling above was quiet. The wall beside the window, calm. But when I looked closer, I noticed something on the glass. A mark, a faint handprint. Small, too small to be mine. It wasn't there before. The condensation shifted around it, slowly fading until the glass looked clean again. But the air in the room stayed cold, colder than before. I sat back down on the couch, hands trembling, heart still waiting for that next sound. And when it didn't come, when the silence stretched too long, I realized something worse. I could still feel it. That same vibration under the floor. That low, trembling hum behind the wall. The cry hadn't stopped. It had just gone quiet, as if it was holding its breath, waiting for me to listen again. It was colder than usual that night. The kind of cold that seeps under the skin, slow, heavy, like the room itself had stopped breathing. I left the window cracked open, just a little, enough to let in air, but not enough for the curtains to move. The clock beside the bed blinked 3:12. The numbers looked pale in the dark. I remember thinking I should close the window, but my body wouldn't listen. I was awake, but I couldn't move. It started as a tightness in my chest, then a pressure, like something was sitting on me, watching. I tried to swallow, tried to lift my arm. Nothing. The air around me thickened, the kind that hums quietly between your ears, like static caught in your skull. I told myself it was just sleep paralysis. I'd had it before. It always passed. But this time, it felt different, because something else was there. The air shifted, just slightly, enough to raise goosebumps along my arms. And then a touch, cold, light as dust, at first on my hand, then across my fingertips. It didn't feel like air. It felt intentional, like something was tracing the edges of my skin, learning the shape of me. I couldn't even blink. My eyes burned, but I kept staring up at the ceiling, too afraid to look anywhere else. The touch moved again, slowly this time, across my wrist, up to my forearm. Each inch it climbed, the colder it got. I wanted to scream, wanted to shift, but the weight on my chest pressed harder. The sheets felt damp now, not with sweat, something else, something clammy. The faint smell of iron filled the air, like rain on rust. I focused on the ceiling light, a small circle of dull glass, as if that would keep me grounded. And then I saw it, a shadow stretching across the plaster. Not my shape, too tall, too narrow. It bent over me, arms reaching, fingers long enough to touch both sides of the bed. The cold moved to my neck. It brushed my jawline, soft and curious. There was no sound, no breathing, only that hum, low, endless. I tried to think of something else. Anything, the clock, the window, the streetlights outside, but my mind kept circling back to that touch. The moment I felt it near my throat, my heart started to pound so hard I thought the pressure might break me. The hand paused, almost as if it was listening to it. Then a single finger pressed gently against my lips. Cold, weightless, a warning, or maybe a test. The room dimmed further, as if the darkness itself leaned closer. I could see the outline now, barely, a pale shimmer against the deeper black. It hovered there, inches from my face, until I felt its breath. Except it wasn't breath. It was colder than air should be, like standing in front of an open freezer. But the cold had intent. It moved toward me, curling around my mouth, sliding down into my lungs. I stopped trying to move, stopped fighting it. I just lay there, eyes wide open, feeling something unseen explore the space between life and sleep. The clock blinked again, 3:13. And just like that, it was gone. The weight lifted. My fingers twitched. I gasped for air. But the room was wrong. The curtains weren't moving. The air wasn't cold anymore. Still, I could feel that touch lingering, faint and ghostly, across my hand. I sat up slowly, heart still unsteady. The sheet slipped from my arm. There were marks, not bruises, not scratches, just pale outlines of fingers, like frost melting into skin. I touched them, but they didn't feel real, didn't feel mine. The window was still open, just a narrow crack. No footprints on the floor. No reason for the chill that lingered there. And yet, as I reached to close it, something brushed the back of my hand again. Soft, cold, careful, like it was reminding me it hadn't really left. It was still there, in the quiet between breaths, in the space where sleep begins, waiting for the next time I couldn't move. It was almost morning. The kind of hour where night still clings to the walls, where the world holds its breath. The air felt heavy again, that quiet kind of heavy, like something unseen had filled the room. I lay there, eyes half open, watching faint light push through the blinds. Dust floated in it, slow, unhurried. I thought maybe tonight would be different. Maybe the silence would stay unbroken. But then I heard it, a whisper, soft, close, too close. It brushed against my ear as if it came from inside the pillow. At first, I thought I was dreaming, that it was some leftover echo from sleep. But the words were clear, low, strained. Leave now. Every muscle in my body locked in place. The sheets tightened against me. I couldn't breathe right. Each inhale caught my throat. I tried to move my hand, my arm, anything, but nothing obeyed. The whisper came again, softer this time, more desperate. Please leave. I wanted to scream, to ask who, to ask why, but my mouth wouldn't open. The air beside me shifted, not a breeze, more like warmth passing through cold, a presence without weight. I could feel it leaning closer, right beside my face. I could smell it, damp like wet stone, old dust, something buried. The whisper trembled, right against my skin. It's coming. The words clung to me, like frost on glass. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding against ribs that refused to rise. And in that stillness, something else began, a faint creak, with bending somewhere near the door. Then another, slow, rhythmic, footsteps, not loud but patient, each one measured, as though whatever it was, already knew where I lay. I wanted to close my eyes, but even my eyelids betrayed me. The whisper pressed harder into my ear, its breath shaking. Don't look. I tried not to, but my gaze drifted anyway, just enough to see the doorway. And there it was, something tall, still, blocking the faint light. Not a person, not really a shape either, just a darker darkness. A hole in the air that shouldn't exist. It didn't move. It only stood there, listening. The whisper quivered. You shouldn't have stayed. The air thickened, so cold it burned my lungs. The shadows stretched, pulling along the floor, reaching for the bed. The boards creaked again, closer this time. My body fought itself. 1,000 silent screams caught behind my teeth. Then the whisper said it once more. Barely a breath, barely a sound. Run. And suddenly I could move. My chest jolted forward. Arms flailed free. I sat up gasping. The room spinning in gray light. The shadow was gone. The air, still, too still. My body shook. The sheets were damp beneath my palms. The whisper had stopped, but its echo stayed lodged inside my skull. I turned toward the door. It was open wider than before, just a sliver of darkness beyond. I don't remember getting up. My legs felt numb, like I was walking underwater. The hallway was colder. Every step stirred faint movement in the air, a rhythm, a heartbeat not my own. The whisper returned, not from beside me this time, from everywhere, from the walls, the ceiling. Go! I ran, down the stairs, through the narrow living room. The front door loomed, the only thing in focus, but the handle wouldn't turn. No matter how hard I pulled, it stayed locked, like something on the other side was holding it shut, and then it stopped. The whisper, the footsteps, the pressure, everything fell silent. Only my breath remained, shaking uneven. The faint morning light began to spill across the floor, soft gold climbing over the rug, touching my hands. I thought maybe I was safe, until I heard it one last time, barely a trace of voice left in it. You waited too long. The light flickered, just once, and behind me, something breathed out, close enough to move the hair on my neck. Then nothing, just stillness, just dawn, and the whisper that never fully fades, circling in my head. Every time I try to sleep, the first light came slowly, soft, pale gold pushing through the blinds. A gentle hum of morning air filled the room. I could feel it still, not in sight, but in the edges of the walls, a lingering weight that pressed softly against my skin. The sheets were cool beneath my fingers, though the bed had been warm. The air smelled faintly of night, damp, dusty, and metallic. I lay there listening. The house breathed with me, Every creak of the floorboards, every distant groan of settling wood, felt sharper than usual. It was gone, and yet not gone, like a shadow folding into the corners, watching from just beyond perception. I turned my head slowly. The window framed the morning sky, soft and pale. No movement outside, no signs of intrusion. Still, the feeling remained. A hollow presence, quiet, patient. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft rustle of curtains in the breeze. Every ordinary sound became sharper, focused, aware. I got up, feet touching the cold wood floor. I shivered. Each step felt tentative, as though the air itself might respond. I walked toward the kitchen. Sunlight stretched across the counters, illuminating dust motes that floated lazily. Even the light seemed uncertain, as if aware of something still hiding. I stopped mid-step. The kitchen felt different, not empty, but occupied in absence. I could almost hear it. A soft breath, a shift in the air behind me, a warmth where there should have been only empty space. I shook my head. The rational part of me whispered, "It's over. You're alone now." But the lingering unease stayed, thick, intangible, like fog clinging to skin. I poured a glass of water, the liquid cool and steady in my hand. Even this simple act felt under scrutiny, as if it were being observed by something unseen. Outside, birds began to stir. The morning was moving, ignoring the shadow that still lingered here. I sat at the table, glass trembling slightly in my fingers. The silence pressed against me, not loud, not threatening, but insistent in its presence. The bed called to me with empty warmth, and the sun moved across the room, painting walls in soft gold and shadow. I realized then I was awake, and yet I was not alone, not in body, but in memory, in the residue of what had passed. The entity left an imprint that did not vanish with darkness. The house smelled faintly of morning dew and dust and something else, something intangible. I could feel it behind my eyes, trailing in the air as I moved, curling in corners where the light could not reach. I breathed slowly, each inhale a reminder of life, each exhale a negotiation with the unseen. Outside, the world continued. Birds, wind, soft, distant traffic. A calm returned, but the edges were tinged with memory and anticipation. I touched the table, the wood rough and real beneath my palm, a grounding point in a world that had shifted, just slightly, forever. I would move through the day, carry on as I must, and yet I knew it would remain, always just beyond perception, waiting in corners, in shadows, in the quiet spaces where I thought I was alone. Sunlight poured deeper into the room. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the warmth, feeling the weight of presence, soft and patient. I was awake. I was alone, and yet not entirely. The morning held me, and the whisper of the night lingered, fading slowly into memory, but never fully gone. I rose, footsteps light on the floor, echoing softly in a house that had not quite returned to ordinary, and I carried forward, with the calm of sunrise and the quiet knowledge that some things remain, even in light.